Welcome to a presentation of the Trust-Based Workplace, the agenda of trust in approximately 20 minutes. The Municipality of Copenhagen has described the agenda of trust as a central element in its quest to rethink the manner in which the municipality is governed, managed, and organized. In short, the purpose of the agenda is to secure more time for quality in the city's core services and increase the joy of work through more focus on trust, professionalism, and elimination of unproductive work processes. In collaboration with a number of unions and NGOs, the Danish government has formulated 7 principles designed to modernize the public sector. Summarized, the principles focus on goals and results, dialogue and transparency, trust and responsibility, professional maneuverability, knowledge, innovation, and engagement of private resources. All these principles have been summed up in one word: trust. But what is trust? When we think of trust, the image of jumping into something where we are not only dependent on ourselves may come to mind. This is a legitimate description, but it becomes harder when we want to be more concrete, because trust is both an elusive concept and a common human quality that everybody knows. In other words, if we want to know trust better, we need to know people better and what basic conditions that govern our lives. When trying to locate an answer, it is worthwhile to consider the existential tradition. This may sound intimidating, and admittedly, the agenda of trust introduces a very bold and ambitious goal. Existential themes and questions can come across as unapproachable and difficult, and even if one has a good intellectual understanding, the gulf between theory and praxis can be vast. Still, existential thoughts are very well suited to shed new light on the agenda of trust. And in this inspirational presentation, I will introduce the existential tradition. This will take us into many territories that are not usually considered in organizational theory and may trigger both curiosity and rejection. But the goal is not to advance one way of doing things or for the listener to remember details. Quite the opposite. Existentialism emphasizes the importance of different interpretations. The goal, therefore, is merely to ignite the listener's fantasy and hopefully inspire new and self-reflecting questions. So lean back and enjoy the journey. Existentialism. Yes, it sounds intimidating, but the name is simply a fancy term for some general thoughts on life that man has always entertained. A central theme in existentialism is the finality of life and the realization of personal death. This has often led many to believe that the existential tradition is morbid or pessimistic, but this is a great misconception. Existentialism confronts life's inevitable death, yes, but only to emphasize the urgency of life and each human being's responsibility for his or her own life. If we truly want to embrace life, we must act bravely, mature, and responsible. And existentialism therefore emphasizes the importance of man's personal responsibility. Man is not merely free, said Sartre. Man is doomed to be free. Or, as he also phrased it, man is the creature whose project is to become God. By this he meant that the universe is contingent or random. Everything that is could have been created differently. Man alone is responsible for assigning meaning to the world, just like we alone are responsible for our lives. Not just for the things we do, but also for the things we do not do. If we accept this proposition, the agenda of trust becomes part of a much larger project and an open hand to all leaders, employees, citizens, relatives, and politicians to recognize their personal responsibility and in everyday practice create a workplace where all concerned are actively engaged in their community and expressing their humanity. But let's start by looking closer at the basic themes of existentialism, or what has also been called life's ultimate concerns. From birth, man must face 4 ultimate concerns: death, freedom or the responsibility for our choices, man's fundamental loneliness and isolation, and man's search for meaning. Even though we are able to relate to these conditions on an intellectual plane, they produce such anxiety and fear in us that we more or less consciously throughout life develop ways to avoid recognizing them. For instance, we readily admit that we are mortal, but deep within we entertain two arguments that can relieve us from the terror of personal death: the illusion of own specialness and the illusion of an outside savior. Likewise, we can avoid recognizing our personal responsibility by acting enforced, as if we have no free will. We can blame others, or we can devalue the need for a discarded alternative, or enhance the values of a chosen alternative unproportionately, or we can postpone or delegate a decision to an external authority. It should be stressed that while existentialism is strongly focused on personal responsibility, existentialism does not claim that man's happiness and well-being is solely dependent on himself. We all encounter adversarial conditions. Sartre calls it an adversarial coefficient. But while heritage, environment, and circumstance plays a part in our lives, what distinguishes man is his attitude towards his or her situation. This makes the question of meaning a central theme that can give our life and work completely new significance. He who has the answer to why can live with almost any how, or so thought Nietzsche. But for modern man, the answer to why can vanish in the horizon because our instincts don't tell us what to do, and tradition no longer tells us what we should do. Soon, we don't even know what we want to do, and we may end up choosing to do simply what everybody else is doing, or we can try to suppress our feelings of emptiness and lack of meaning. The agenda of trust is therefore also an invitation to promote a meaningful shared quest for a worthy goal, where management and employees can identify targets that are meaningful for the employees and congruent with the priorities of the organization. No matter what interest and help, however, that the organization offers, man's search for meaning is ultimately a subjective experience. All humans must, therefore, themselves consider and investigate how their personal search for meaning can come into play. After this introduction to existentialism, let's look at the joy and meaning of work. When we think of efficiency, we typically think of economic efficiency. It's second nature for us to consider efficiency a decisive economic parameter, whereas meaning is rarely juxtaposed with efficiency. If the regard for economic efficiency is the sole parameter, however, our organizations may turn into impersonal machines that only includes its employees when they contribute to production as human resources. Thus, one may criticize not the importance of the economic perspective, but the priority of economic factors, especially since this may serve counterproductive and reduce efficiency to a simple question of meeting a number of pre-established criteria. Efficiency is more than economic efficiency. Rather, efficiency, or the act of creating, is something that occupies a central place in our minds. Some even claim that the essence of existence is to create. At the same time, it is a widely held belief that self-realization is the ultimate achievement for man. According to the existential tradition, however, man's need for self-realization is not a goal in itself, but a consequence of the need to transcend oneself. What one may call transcendence only occurs when man achieves something that forces him to distance himself from egocentric interest and concentrate his efforts on an authentic being with others in the world. This desire to realize ourselves in close companionship with our fellow men is rooted in our ancient past and ties us together on a deep spiritual plane. Self-realization is therefore closely related to feeling part of a cause that transcends ourselves, but that we can become part of through our personal engagement and creative skills. After considering the joy and meaning of work, Let's turn our attention towards a contemporary appreciation of work and the organizational ideal. Most organizational literature and most organizations are practically obsessed with the logic of perfection or the excellence ideal. The logic of perfection exhorts people to make perfect objects or services. Individuals willingly commit to this type of work because perfection is something that the human being regards as an ideal to be pursued. The finitude of the human being, however, as a limited, imperfect, and mortal being, is an inherent condition of existence. Hence, the logic of perfection sets the individual on an existential quest for perfection that can never be successful. This makes it literally impossible for the individual to achieve anything meaningful, since being effective equals perfection, an unobtainable goal. The demand for perfection, however, and being the best is still regarded the ultimate ideal, and since we are considered our own life's entrepreneurs, the demand for perfection is a possibility we must always chase. The organizational demands for perfection and professional success goes hand in hand with the employee's own desire for work or workaholism as a way to evade life's ultimate concerns. The existential tradition holds that addiction is a self-imposed way for man to avoid confronting the fundamental conditions of existence. The workaholic, in other words, himself or herself, choose a life of relentless work to keep the difficult questions of life at bay. Since work also provides our economic foundation, incessant work and professional success becomes both a moral and an economic obligation. Today, most people are used to constant action. They complain about it, but whenever the constant communication and chatter is muted, they become restless and wonder what's going on. This creates a paradox where our attempts to find meaning by working more end up creating less meaning that more work is again the answer to. The result may be managerial man. Managerial man has completely committed himself to the organization that he or she sees as a tool to fulfill an inner need. In other words, managerial man is doomed to success because success for him or her is the only answer to existential anxiety. To change this course, we need to raise awareness that a superficial and inauthentic life will always be experienced as stressful, no matter how we choose to think about it. No work can do anything about our confrontation with the fundamental conditions of existence, and as long as we try to deny them, we will always be sick in a more or less severe degree. We need a physical change, but if we really want to change matters on a societal level, we also need a mental shift, and we need to be more critical towards the admiration of workaholism. After looking at workaholism as an attempt to suppress life's fundamental condition, let's look at the relationship between managers and employees. A substantial part of contemporary managerial literature is based on the deeply rooted notion that humankind is blessed with a few exceptional individuals who are the incarnation of the entrepreneurial phenomenon, the creator and manager of organizations of all ilks. There are many good managers, but this investment in the leader may result in obedient participants and organizations that dare not question agreed truth and that are reluctant to report malfunctions or mistakes, since the leader, well, he or she already knows everything. Instead, the culture may be characterized by presumed agreement, avoidance of conflict, consensus-seeking behavior, or anal control systems that annihilates any ability or desire to act authentic, creative, and innovative. The result may be organizations prone to structural diseases and organizational disasters despite ample resources and knowledge. In order to enable the employee's full potential, managers must agree, symbolically and materially, to step down from their pedestals as super people who manage others. Instead, they must try to embody the hero according to Greek mythology. According to Greek mythology, a hero is a person that, at the peril of one's life and on behalf of one's fellow human, perform truly heroic acts while transgressing the taboos that mere mortals cannot transgress, and accepting in full lucidity the idea of one's death. In other words, leaders should be role models we truly look up to and that guarantees material and existential equity. But the employees must also live up to their personal responsibility. They must seize the moment and in everyday practice make the organization a workplace where the employees actively take part in and express their humanity. All people are on their own personal hero's journey, and while the workplace may create space, ultimately, as employees, we are responsible for how we relate to a given situation and how we choose to act. Now, after having considered each employee's personal responsibility and the relationship between management and employees, let's look at what may be called the dark side of organizations. We can think of the dark side of organization as that part of culture that is experienced by the participants as something that should not be part of the culture, as the shameful or shadowy side. It is the part of life that is not acknowledged and that individuals attempt to bar from their conscious awareness. The opposite of the dark side is the light side, or the organizational ideal, that we are happy to talk about at length. The organizational ideal represents a state where all individuals fit perfectly with their task, where they work spontaneously and out of desire, with no inner or outer pressure. Like all ideals, the organizational ideal never materializes, but remains a horizon we always chase. If we want to understand and work with our organizations in depth, however, it is not enough to confine ourselves to the light side, since the light and dark side work together as a whole. The dark side is expressed in many fashions, for instance, as the excellence ideal or workaholism. However, also mere adherence to abstract principles is part of the dark side because it implies a possible willingness in the name of principle to participate in the extinction of the one thing that is not abstract, our humaneness. The existential tradition therefore argues that light on the dark side, no matter how painful and inconvenient it may be, in the long run is always more fruitful than leaving the dark side in the dark. So what then can we do to promote a better dialogue and understanding between all concerned parties? The American psychologist and human resource theorist Carl Rogers put it simple. When someone really hears you, without passing judgment on you, without trying to take responsibility for you, without trying to mold you, it feels damn good. Carl Rogers' point is that if you offer what he called a special type of relationship, the other person will discover within himself the capacity to use that relationship for growth, and change and personal development will occur. Thus, for a person's creative potential to be released, what matters is not corporate lingo, authority, knowledge, techniques, or interpretations, but communicating that the employee is accepted and affirmed, without judgment or evaluation, in becoming a person entirely different from all other people, including the manager, colleague, organization, and listener. It is the relationship itself that cures. And only by being willing to be oneself in a relationship, by accepting one's own and the other's unique character, and receive the same acceptance, can man discover his creativity and strength for true change. In this connection, one needs to be very aware that active listening presupposes that there is no singular objective reality. There are only interpretations of the world, and active listening therefore demands that one must accept that no two interpretations are completely alike. Thus, for active listening to materialize, the leader and organization must express genuine empathetic understanding, and try to see the employee's reality through the eyes of the employee, open-minded, curious, and without any prejudice. No man can always meet these standards, but the message of the agenda of trust is merely to try and with time become better and better at active listening. All collaboration and management is a live and creative art in action, and not a specific process or method that can be learned and obtained once and for all. Rather, it is a way of being that must be created and recreated throughout life, both on a personal and on a professional level. With this, we've come almost full circle, and after considering potent topics such as trust, transcendence, and active listening, one may be anxious to learn how to apply all these thoughts in everyday practice. Well, let's be honest. The existential perspective does not enable us to formulate a precise working program for the agenda of trust. For such tasks, existentialism is too slippery and feels almost like a wet soap. It slips out of our hands every time we try to grab it, but is very real in terms of the foam it leaves. But if existentialism poses big questions, it is only because life poses big questions. And the message of existentialism and the agenda of trust is therefore for each of us to seize the moment in order to create a workplace where people rather than systems take center stage. This is not necessarily an easy task, and one cannot embark on this journey without mistakes, misunderstandings, injuries, and insecurity along the way. But a courageous confrontation with the fundamental conditions of life and all sides of our organizations enables a far more creative and fruitful dialogue where we can investigate the fundamental why before trying to answer how. In this perspective, the agenda of trust suggests a new type of questions that offers an opportunity to see one's organization and workplace in a much broader perspective and with far more potential. We can, for instance, start by asking, does a specific initiative promote the development of individual responsibility, meaning, and values? What would your workday and workplace look like if they were perfectly congruent with your goals and values? Which working tasks today are not in line with your meaning and values? Which ones are in line, and how can they strengthen one another further? What does the dark side of your organization look like? What task in the organization resembles the excellence ideal? Does the organization recognize the importance of its employees' physical and mental health? Are complex questions sometimes or often reduced to simplified for-against propositions? And where in the organization can active listening be enhanced? These are all examples of trustworthy questions, but it should be stressed that they are exactly that, examples. The decisive question, well, actually the only question of any importance is what questions you want to ask. With those words, we've come full circle. As this presentation reveals, existentialism poses big questions and offers no easy answers. Still, use of the existential tradition can be a goldmine of ideas, meaning, and resources for the courageous man or woman, employee, manager, relative, or politician that wants to investigate the roots of man and apply the wisdom found here in real life. It is my hope this introduction to existentialism may motivate such journey and that the listener's imagination and self-reflection has been engaged. In the end, this is where the only battle of any importance will take place. For now, thank you for your attention and feel free to visit my website for more inspirational presentations on existentialism, the agenda of trust, and organizational theory. Thank you.